Billionaire pretended to be drunk. What his maid did next left him shaken. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The night was quiet at the Beaumont estate, a mansion that stood like a monument to power and perfection. Every window glowed with soft amber light, every surface polished until it gleamed like glass. Yet inside, beneath all the marble and gold, something cold lingered: loneliness. Ethan Beaumont, the billionaire everyone in New York feared and envied, stood by the grand piano, a half-finished glass of whiskey in his hand. His tuxedo jacket hung loosely from his shoulders, his tie undone. To his household staff, he looked drunk again. But tonight was different. He was not drunk. He was pretending to be. He wanted to see if kindness still existed in the people around him, or if money had erased it long ago. Especially in her. Her name was Clara Hale, the youngest maid in the house. Quiet, polite, never once asked for anything beyond her duty. Ethan had noticed her long before tonight, how she moved carefully, as if afraid to break the silence of his home. How she always placed a single flower in the dining room, even when no one else cared. But what caught his attention most was not what she did, it was what she never did. She never flattered him. She never looked at him the way others did, with fear, greed, or hunger for approval. So tonight, he wanted to know who she really was. He poured another drink, let the amber liquid spill a little on the marble floor, and staggered toward the hallway, like a man losing his balance. His acting was deliberate, every step measured. He wanted to see what she would do when faced with a drunk billionaire. Clara was in the kitchen, washing crystal glasses. When she heard the sound of glass shattering in the hallway, she rushed out without hesitation. "Mr. Beaumont," she gasped, kneeling beside him. The tumbler lay in pieces, and his hand trembled near it. He slurred his words just enough. "Leave it. Go back to your chores." But she did not. She picked up the larger shards carefully, her fingers shaking slightly. "You are going to cut yourself, sir. Please let me help you." Her tone was soft but steady, no disgust, no judgment, just simple concern. He leaned closer, pretending to lose balance, watching her face from inches away. Most people would have stepped back, afraid of offending their employer. But Clara stayed where she was, holding out a towel to wipe the spill. "Sir, you should sit," she said. "You have had enough for tonight." Something in her voice, gentle, almost maternal, struck him harder than the whiskey ever could. He could have stopped pretending. He could have told her the truth right then. But instead, he tested her further. He reached into his pocket and dropped a folded bill on the floor. $100 note. "For the trouble," he muttered. Clara froze, staring at the money for a long second. Then she picked it up and placed it on the table beside him. "I am not here for that, sir," she said quietly. "Please take care of yourself." And with that, she helped him to his feet, guided him toward the living room sofa, and adjusted the blanket over his shoulders. He pretended to drift into a drunken sleep, but his mind was wide awake, filled with a silence he had not felt in years. As she walked away, he opened his eyes slightly. Clara's reflection lingered in the mirror across the room, small and humble against the vastness of his mansion. For the first time in a long time, Ethan Beaumont felt something shift inside him. Not guilt, not desire, something deeper: respect. And that was the moment he realized his test had just begun. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Beaumont mansion, painting golden lines across the floor. The air smelled faintly of polished oak and fresh coffee. Ethan Beaumont sat at the breakfast table, a newspaper open in front of him, though he was not reading it. He was thinking about the night before. He remembered how Clara's hands had steadied him, how she had refused the money without hesitation. No one in his world ever said no to $100, not even his closest friends. It was a gesture so small, yet it echoed in his mind like thunder. When Clara entered the dining room carrying a silver tray, Ethan watched her carefully. She placed his coffee on the table and said softly, "Good morning, sir. Do you need anything else?" He wanted to ask her why she had stayed late last night, why she had bothered to help him when she could have ignored it and gone to bed. But instead, he only nodded. "No, that will be all." She turned to leave, but then paused. "Sir," she said quietly, "you dropped your wallet near the piano last night. I left it on your desk." Ethan froze for a moment. He had not realized he dropped it. Inside that wallet was a folded photo, his late mother and father on their wedding day, the last reminder of when wealth still meant family. No one in his household had ever mentioned it, yet she had noticed, and she had cared enough to return it. That afternoon, Ethan called his personal assistant. "Send everyone home early," he ordered, except Clara. By sunset, the mansion was silent again. When Clara appeared at the doorway, uncertain, he gestured for her to sit across from him. The contrast was stark, his tailored gray suit and her simple maid uniform, but her eyes met his with quiet steadiness. "Clara," he began, his tone measured. "How long have you worked here?" They heard back to down into show, wish you like self. Sludly and writing was flongs. "Almost 8 months, sir." "And in 8 months have I ever treated you kindly?" She hesitated. "You have always been fair, sir." "That is enough." Ethan leaned back, studying her expression. "Last night you could have taken that money. You could have told the others what you saw. But you did not." "Why?" Clara lowered her gaze. "Because you were not yourself, sir. Everyone deserves a moment of weakness in private. I would not want someone to judge me for mine." Her answer landed heavier than he expected. For years he had built walls of steel around himself, contracts, lawyers, and assistants. But this woman, standing quietly in a borrowed uniform, had just dismantled all of it with a single sentence. He felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not admiration, not yet affection, but an ache, a realization of how lonely his empire had become. When she stood to leave, he stopped her. "You have the weekend off," he said suddenly. She blinked. "Sir, I do not." "That is an order. Take it. Do something for yourself." Clara gave a small, unsure smile. "Thank you, Mr. Beaumont." After she was gone, Ethan stared out the tall window overlooking the city. The reflection staring back at him was not the proud billionaire he showed the world. It was a man who had built everything except a reason to smile. And for the first time in years, he found himself wondering if the quiet honesty of one maid could change the way he saw his own life. By the next week, something inside Ethan Beaumont had begun to change. It was subtle at first, the way he greeted his staff in the morning, the way he noticed details he used to ignore. The world outside his office windows no longer looked like a battlefield of numbers and deals. It looked human. But change never comes without curiosity. He found himself thinking about Clara more often than he wanted to admit. What did she do with her free weekend? Did she have family, friends, a life outside his mansion? For a man who once believed he could buy every answer, it unsettled him that he could not simply pay to know hers. One afternoon, he walked past the servants' quarters, a place he had never entered before. The hallway was narrow, the air faintly scented with detergent and soap. Through the half-open door, he saw her Clara sitting by the window, mending an old uniform. Her hair was tied loosely, her expression calm, lost in thought. "Clara," he said softly. She looked up, startled, standing immediately. "Mr. Beaumont, I did not expect you here." He smiled faintly. "Neither did I." He stepped inside, glancing around the small room. There were no decorations, only a few folded books, a potted plant, and a photograph of an elderly woman on the nightstand. "Your mother?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, sir. She is in a nursing home upstate. I visit when I can." "And you send money to her?" Ethan said, noticing the neatly sealed envelope on her desk. Clara hesitated. "I try, sir. It is not much." He felt a sting of shame. In this same house, thousands of dollars were spent each week on wine, flowers, and pointless art, while the woman who kept it spotless lived with barely enough to send her mother medicine. That evening, Ethan went back to his office and opened a drawer he had not touched in years. Inside lay a contract template, the kind he used to manipulate business rivals. He stared at it, then began to type something new. When morning came, he called Clara to his study. She entered cautiously, unsure why she was there. He gestured toward the chair. "Sit down. I have a proposal." Her brow furrowed. "A proposal, sir?" "Yes," he said, leaning forward. "I am attending the Beaumont Charity Gala next month. It is a very public event, and I need someone to act as my personal companion for the evening. Someone who is not pretending to like me for money or fame." Her eyes widened. "You mean me?" Ethan nodded. You will be paid fairly. Your job is simple, just be yourself. Is recevely a getaway and accepted a velaway? Clara looked stunned. Sir, I am not sure that is appropriate. People will talk. Let them, Ethan said calmly. They already do. She bit her lip, torn between fear and disbelief. And if I say no, he smiled gently, then you will remain exactly what you are, a woman I respect. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she nodded slowly. All right, I will do it. When she left, Ethan leaned back in his chair. He did not fully understand why he had made that offer, or why it mattered so much that she accepted. But deep down, he knew this was not about appearances anymore. It was about the first honest connection he had felt in years, one that no amount of wealth could buy. The days leading up to the Beaumont Charity Gala moved quickly. For the first time in years, Ethan Beaumont felt something he could not name: anticipation. He caught himself checking his watch more often, looking down the hallway whenever footsteps approached, as if expecting to see Clara walk by. On the morning of the event, his personal stylist arrived with racks of gowns and jewelry for her to choose from. Clara stood awkwardly by the door, refusing at first to even touch the glittering fabric. Sir, these must cost more than I earn in a year, she whispered. Ethan smiled slightly. Then think of it as a loan. Return them after tonight. It is now billed to H and it billed to wear it now on it. She hesitated but nodded, allowing the stylist to help her. When she finally stepped out from behind the screen, Ethan felt his breath catch. The simple navy gown hugged her frame modestly, the color bringing out the warmth in her eyes. She did not look like a maid anymore. She looked timeless. He cleared his throat. You clean up well, he said, trying to sound casual. Clara lowered her gaze, cheeks faintly pink. Thank you, sir. I will try not to embarrass you. You could not, even if you tried, he replied softly. That evening, the ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers. The city's elite filled the space with champagne, laughter, and polite gossip. Cameras flashed as Ethan entered, Clara walking a few steps behind him. Conversations slowed, eyes followed. Whispers began immediately. Is that his new fiancée? Someone murmured. Impossible, she looks ordinary. Clara heard every word but kept her head high. Ethan offered his arm, and when she hesitated, he leaned close. Ignore them. You belong here as much as anyone. She took his arm. The murmurs faded. Together they moved through the crowd, poised and silent, until a board member approached with a smirk. Mr. Beaumont, you always surprise us. New charity project? Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Clara smiled gently. No, sir. Just a friend reminding him to stay human. The man blinked, caught off guard. The small crowd chuckled, and even Ethan found himself smiling. The moment broke the tension, and the rest of the evening flowed easier. During dinner, Clara helped an elderly guest steady her glass, even wiping the spill on the tablecloth before the servers could react. She moved with quiet grace, earning soft smiles from those who had mocked her minutes earlier. Later, as the orchestra played a slow waltz, Ethan turned to her. You saved me tonight, he said. Clara shook her head. You did not need saving, sir. You just needed to remember why you started this foundation: to help people, not impress them. It is Wannerbatter. Her words struck him harder than any speech he had ever given. For years, his charity galas had been about image proof that he was still the man his father wanted him to be. But tonight, standing beside this woman who had no reason to flatter him, he felt something shift. When the music faded, they stepped onto the terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. City lights blinked below like scattered stars. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said quietly, You know, Clara, I once believed everyone had a price. She looked at him, her voice calm. And now? He met her eyes. Now I am not so sure. She smiled faintly. That sounds like progress, sir. And Rosamismus apps. He laughed softly, the sound foreign to his own ears. For once, the billionaire who had everything felt genuinely alive, and it had nothing to do with power, or money, or the world watching inside that ballroom. It had everything to do with her. The night of the Beaumont Charity Gala ended in a blur of lights and murmured congratulations. When the last guest left and the orchestra fell silent, Ethan escorted Clara to the waiting car himself. Neither of them spoke on the ride back to the mansion. The city lights passed through the window like fragments of a dream. When they arrived, Clara reached for the door handle, but Ethan's voice stopped her. Clara, before you go, thank you. Tonight was more than I expected. She smiled softly. I only did what was right, sir. But Ethan shook his head. No. You reminded me what right looks like. She looked at him, startled, unsure how to answer. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, caught in a silence that felt heavier than words. Then she lowered her gaze. Good night, Mr. Beaumont. After she left, Ethan sat in the parked car for a long time, realizing he no longer wanted the silence that filled his mansion every night. He wanted laughter. He wanted warmth. He wanted her. The next morning, rumors of the gala flooded social media. Headlines read, Billionaire arrives with mystery woman. Ethan Beaumont's secret date stuns the city. Reporters speculated endlessly about who Clara was, twisting the story into something scandalous. By noon, Clara was summoned to the main office. Ethan's assistant looked nervous. Mr. Beaumont wants to see you right away. When she entered, Ethan stood behind his desk, holding a newspaper. His face was unreadable. They have printed lies, he said quietly. They are calling you a gold digger. Clara froze. I did not say anything, sir. I swear. I know you did not, he interrupted, his tone firm. I just need to know if you can handle this. Because it will get worse before it gets better. She swallowed hard. I will be fine. People can think what they want. The truth will stay the same. Her calmness disarmed him. Most people would have panicked or begged for protection, but she only stood tall, dignity intact. Later that afternoon, the board of directors called Ethan. They questioned his judgment, hinted that his maid companion was damaging the company's image. One man even suggested firing her to control the narrative. Ethan's jaw clenched. She has done nothing wrong, he said coldly. If this company cannot survive decency, then maybe the problem is not her. They work into 7. That night, rain drummed against the glass walls of his study. Ethan poured himself a drink, but did not touch it. The storm outside matched the one in his chest. For years he had believed that control meant strength, that power could shield him from every weakness. But now he saw it clearly. The real weakness was fear. Clara's courage, her quiet grace under judgment, was stronger than any armor he had ever built. When he finally left his office, he found her in the foyer, gathering her things. You are leaving? He asked. She nodded. I thought it might be better for both of us, sir. The press will forget faster if I am gone. Ethan felt his throat tighten. And what if I do not want you to go? She looked up, meeting his eyes. Then you would be asking me to stay for the wrong reason. He took a step closer, his voice low. What if it is the right one? For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Clara turned away. Good night, Mr. Beaumont. As she disappeared down the hallway, Ethan realized something that shook him more than any scandal ever could. He had started this as a test. But somehow, he was the one being tested, and he was losing his heart. The next few days passed in a fog of silence. Clara no longer appeared in the dining room or the gardens. Ethan Beaumont tried to focus on his business meetings, but every conversation blurred into background noise. For the first time in his life, the mansion that had once felt like his fortress now felt like a cage. Every night, he found himself standing near the grand staircase, listening for the faint sound of her footsteps, the quiet hum of her voice in the kitchen, but it never came. On the 4th evening, his housekeeper, Mrs. Lyle, hesitated before knocking on his office door. Sir, there is something you should know, she said softly. Clara turned in her resignation this morning. The words hit him harder than he expected. Where is she now? In May quarter deduct. She packed her things and went to the nursing home upstate, sir. Her mother's health has declined. Ethan stood abruptly. Get the car ready. The drive north was long and gray, the sky heavy with clouds. By the time he reached the small town, dusk had already settled. The nursing home sat quietly at the edge of a hill, its porch light flickering in the mist. He found Clara in a small room with pale curtains, sitting beside her mother's bed. She looked up, startled, when he appeared in the doorway. Mr. Beaumont? What are you doing here? I came to see you, he said simply. You should not have, she whispered. You have a company to run, and people already think. Let them think what they want, he interrupted. I do not care anymore. Her eyes softened, but she shook her head. That is not true. You care too much about what people say. That is why you tested me that night, remember? You wanted to prove that goodness still existed. You found it, but you still hide from it. Ethan stepped closer, his voice quieter now. I was wrong to test you. I wanted to see if anyone could look past my name, my money, but I never expected you to look at me the way you did with nothing to gain." Clara smiled sadly. "That is because you did not believe anyone could." It made her rousing. For a long moment, the only sound was the slow rhythm of her mother's breathing. Then Ethan placed a small envelope on the bedside table. "It is for her medical care. No conditions, no contract." Clara stared at it, her lips trembling. "I cannot take this." "Yes, you can," he said, "because it is not charity. It is gratitude." She looked at him, and for the first time, the distance between them felt fragile, almost gone. When he left the room, the cool air outside hit his face like a confession. He realized he had come here not as a billionaire trying to fix things with money, but as a man desperate to do something right for once. As he reached the car, his phone buzzed, an urgent call from his assistant. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Rumors had resurfaced, this time accusing him of misusing company funds for a maid. Ethan closed his eyes, anger and exhaustion swirling together. He had spent his life building an empire of control, and yet everything that mattered most was now slipping away. He looked back at the small nursing home, glowing in the distance, and whispered to himself, "They can take the company if they want, but I will not lose her." That sinkingly doge. Last half saying, in the Brappert. That was the night Ethan Beaumont made a decision that would change everything. He would stop pretending, stop testing, and start fighting for the one person who had shown him what truth really looked like. The next morning, Ethan Beaumont walked into the boardroom of Beaumont Industries with a calmness that made everyone nervous. The city skyline stretched behind him like a wall of glass, but he did not look out. He looked directly at the 12 men and women who had once feared him and now doubted him. At the head of the table, the chairman, Richard Hale, cleared his throat. "Ethan, we need to address the issue at hand. The media is questioning your behavior. Your so-called relationship with a maid is damaging our public image." Ethan's expression stayed steady. "You mean the woman who saved me from becoming everything I used to hate?" Richard frowned. "This is not personal, Ethan. Investors are watching. If you do not step back from this scandal, you risk everything." Ethan leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. "Everything? You mean my reputation? My money? My seat at this table? Tell me something, Richard. When did decency become bad for business?" The room fell silent. No one had ever heard him speak like that before. An older director finally spoke. "The press is saying you use company funds to help her family. Veni ever Joe in Congress." "I did," Ethan said simply, "with my own salary. Not a single cent came from company accounts, and if any of you had taken 5 minutes to ask instead of assume, you would have known that." A murmur spread through the room. Richard adjusted his tie, clearly rattled. "Still, perception matters. We need a statement distancing the company from your personal life." Ethan stood up slowly, placing both hands on the table. "Then write one. But include this line: Ethan Beaumont refuses to apologize for helping someone who showed him more integrity than most billionaires ever will." No one moved. He took a deep breath. "I built this company from the ground up. I made all of you wealthy. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it meant to be human. That is over." He reached into his jacket and set a folder on the table. "Here is my letter of resignation. Effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. Richard's voice cracked. "Ethan, be reasonable." "I am," he said, cutting him off. For the first time, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. The elevator doors closed behind him, sealing off years of pressure, politics, and pride. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in years, he felt free. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove back to the nursing home. Clara was in the courtyard, sitting on a wooden bench with her mother, helping her feed birds with gentle patience. When she saw him, she stood quickly, confusion in her eyes. "Mr. Beaumont?" He smiled faintly. "It is just Ethan now. I quit." Her brow furrowed. "You quit your company?" "Yes," he said. "They wanted me to choose between my reputation and my conscience. I chose peace." Clara shook her head slowly, still stunned. "You did not have to do that because of me." "I did not do it because of you," he said softly. "I did it because you reminded me who I used to be before I started pretending." Her eyes shimmered, but she looked away. "You cannot just walk away from everything. And the dread is weighted das in made it all. He smiled. I already did once when I lost myself. I am just finding my way back. For the first time, she did not call him sir. She whispered his name instead. Ethan. He looked at her, and in that quiet moment between falling snow and slow breaths, the truth settled between them. He had tested her honesty, but it was her kindness that tested his soul, and she had won. Ethan Beaumont's resignation made headlines across the country the next morning. Every financial network and newspaper carried the same headline: Billionaire steps down, cites integrity over image. Some mocked him, some praised him, but for the first time, Ethan did not care. He stayed in the small town near the nursing home, renting a quiet cabin by the lake. He spent his days visiting Clara and her mother, fixing small things around the facility, and helping the staff with donations. The once untouchable billionaire now carried boxes and cleaned windows, and strangely, he had never felt richer. One evening, Clara found him on the porch, repairing a broken bird feeder. The sunset stretched across the lake, warm and quiet. You are getting better at that, she said, smiling softly. I have had practice, he replied, brushing sawdust from his hands. It turns out, work feels different when it actually helps someone. Clara sat beside him. I saw the news. You could have cleared your name, Ethan. Why did you not? He looked at the water for a long time before answering. Because the truth does not need a headline, and because walking away from all that noise gave me something I never had: peace. She nodded slowly. Peace suits you. A comfortable silence fell between them until she said quietly, My mother asked about you today. He smiled. Did she? She said you looked lonely, Clara continued. I told her you are learning not to be. Ethan laughed softly. She is a wise woman. Clara's eyes lingered on him. She also said you remind her of my father, stubborn, proud, and lost, until someone loved him enough to tell him the truth. The sieve feeding well man's. Ethan met her gaze, and something gentle passed between them. Then I owe your mother a thank you, he said. The next day, the local community center announced that an anonymous donor had given enough money to rebuild the town's nursing home. Everyone suspected Ethan, but he said nothing. He did not want recognition. He wanted restoration. Later that week, Clara came to find him sitting by the lake again, this time holding a sealed envelope. The nursing home wanted me to give this to you, she said. Inside was a handwritten note, for the man who remembered what money is for. Thank you. It was signed by every nurse and patient in the facility. Ethan folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. This means more than every award I have ever received, he said quietly. Clara smiled. Then maybe you are finally learning what really matters. He turned toward her, his tone softer. You taught me that. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed a number he had not seen in weeks. It was Richard Hale, the chairman of the board. He hesitated but answered. Ethan, the press is turning your resignation into something bigger, Richard said. People are questioning our ethics. We need you to come back at least to give a statement. Ethan looked at Clara, her eyes full of calm strength. I will come, he said slowly, but I will tell them the truth. The following afternoon, he stood before a room packed with reporters and cameras. Clara watched from the back as he spoke clearly into the microphones. Yes, I left my company. Yes, I helped someone who worked for me, because decency should never be a scandal. Flashes went off. Questions shouted. But Ethan only smiled, a quiet, certain smile. When the conference ended, he walked straight to Clara. They wanted an image, he said. I gave them the truth. She nodded, pride shining in her eyes. And sometimes, the truth is all anyone needs. This was a great Atterbin. Is there one? For the first time in years, Ethan felt completely unafraid because the world could twist his story, but it could never twist what she had made him become. The weeks after Ethan Beaumont's public statement passed quietly, almost peacefully. The frenzy around his resignation faded, replaced by admiration. News outlets began calling it the Beaumont redemption. But to him, it was never about redemption. It was about starting over without pretending. Ethan moved his office to a smaller building in the same town as Clara's nursing home. He reopened his father's old foundation this time, not as a publicity stunt, but as a real effort to help families struggling with medical bills. He spent his mornings at the foundation, his afternoons visiting the nursing home, and his evenings sitting with Clara by the lake, where the air always smelled faintly of pine and rain. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the water, Clara joined him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him and said, You know, My mother keeps asking when I'm going to bring you home for dinner again. He smiled softly. Does she know I am terrible at small talk? She said you will learn. Besides, Clara added with a teasing grin, she likes you. He chuckled, then grew quiet. I like her too. She reminds me of what family used to feel like. Clara looked at him thoughtfully. You could have that again, you know. You just have to stop living. Like everything good will disappear the moment you reach for it. Ethan turned toward her, his eyes gentle. And if the only thing I want to reach for is you? Her breath caught. For a moment, the world around them seemed to still the ripples on the water, the whisper of wind in the trees. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring, nothing like the grand diamond pieces he used to buy for business deals and appearances. This one was humble, elegant, and real. Clara, he said quietly, I do not have a company anymore. I do not have a mansion full of servants or a reputation to protect, but I have you. And that feels like everything I ever pretended to have before. So I am asking, will you let me start again with you? Tears welled in her eyes, and she covered her mouth, speechless. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, Ethan, but only if you promise never to test anyone's heart again. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Deal. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt less like a proposal and more like a promise, one built not on contracts or wealth, but on the truth they had both fought to protect. Later, at a small ceremony in the nursing home garden, surrounded by patients, staff, and Clara's mother smiling proudly, they exchanged vows. The guests threw white petals instead of confetti, and the air was filled with laughter. Ethan held her hands and whispered, I once built an empire from numbers and lies, but this is the only thing I ever built from honesty. Clara smiled through tears. Then it will last. As the music played softly, he looked up at the sky, where the last light of sunset painted everything gold. The mansion, the scandals, the loneliness, they all felt like another lifetime. Now there was only her hand in his, the sound of laughter, and the quiet peace of a life that finally made sense. And so, the billionaire who once pretended to be drunk to test his maid learned the greatest truth of all, that real love begins when you stop pretending.